Welcome to the show today. Today I have Florian Wille on the show, and he's a design strategist at Dreipol, and he's also a lecturer at the University of Zurich of Arts. And I'm very excited to have you on the show today, Florian, and dive a little bit into your story and into the lessons you learned along the way. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So let's dive right into your story. Maybe you can share a couple of moments or details or experiences from your past that you feel really shaped you as a human being, that really shaped you as part of your career.
Well, to start really early, it's when I was a kid. I grew up in Austria, in Tyrol, in the mountains, a tiny village, and well, I'd say like many people who are a bit different or have a different mindset, I was not the most popular kid there. So I very early on was looking for things I'm good at. So my search of what I'm good at was my starting point. Because a couple of years later, when I did a school for interior design and carpentry, I realized that designing things came easier to me than it came to my classmates. To some of them. So that was the moment I realized shaping things is fun and inventing things is fun. That was like my earliest dream, or my earliest dream of what I wanted to become when I was an inventor. So that was my first path. The other thing was that I, as a kid, was really bad in reading complex, ill-designed, be it user interfaces or even pages that were badly laid out. I had to sort of sort information always for myself so I could understand them well when I revisited them. And a couple of years later, I realized that the things I sorted out so they seemed logic to me seemed logic to others as well. So my love for inventing things and my love to sort of tidy up things and tidy up information that came together at some point when I realized that there is a field of interaction design, service design, industrial design. All this are skills that are really helpful there.
Now that's a really interesting story because very often we have these experiences where we realize, okay, we're good at certain things, we're bad at others. But how do you, just let's go right into this. This is something I'm very curious about. How do you turn such a realization into an actual career? You're in a really interesting, really innovative, very creative field now, and it resonates really well with your personality and your skills. So how do you go from sort of like understanding what you're good at and what you're not so good at to actually turning that into a career?
Well, I sort of stumbled my way forward. I went from being a furniture designer and carpenter who occasionally did websites as well, to working in the industry, designing furniture, but always being the guy who did the website for the company I was currently working for. And so when I was 16 in 96, I did the first website for the archaeological museum in my village. So by that time, I was always the guy who already has done a website. So that's how I have my vision of becoming a designer, but always had to do websites. And I sort of did that reluctantly for a very long time, till at some point, a guy I was working for said, come on, why are you fighting against it? You're a usability guy, just embrace it. And so I was then looking for a way to have the physical design I'm very interested in and the usability, how to combine that. And I was very, very lucky when I started this design school in my mid-20s. I was working for several years and then started to study. I accidentally started studying at the same time Hartmut Esslinger, the founder of Frog Design, former designer of Apple and sort of 2/3 of other Fortune 500 companies. He just, as a semi-retirement scheme, he started teaching at our university. And that just coincided at the same time I started studying there. started studying there, he joined in. So by accident, I just happened to stumble onto a great mentor for the upcoming 5 years then. So that's where I realized that this whole usability part I'm interested in, and the whole physical designing part, they can really join together.
So
and
yeah.
yeah.
I just wanted to say it's really interesting. What I'm hearing is like there was a great boss that you had, you know, who said, you know, stop fighting,
Yeah.
stop fighting it. And then you also got you surround yourself with great mentors, or a great mentor, and then probably also several more mentors. That's a really powerful thing, because I see that as a red thread as well throughout you know, people's success journeys. So that's a really interesting one. So let's dive a little bit more into, you already touched on it, but what is it that got you into this field of work that you are right now? Because you could have designed anything at the end of the day, right? You could have gone into many different directions. But what got you really interested, or what gets you most excited about the work that you're doing now?
Well, the field I'm working in now is, by now I'm sort of specialized on complex industrial interfaces, designing sort of experience for the industry, for production processes, or for complex interfaces that span across many touch points, or where the interface itself might be huge. So say a cable car. A cable car has controls at the valley, at the mountain top, and they all need to somehow work together. And some of them are digital, some of them are physical. And I got into that whole field also by accident, a bit because I started a job in 2013 as a design lead for an industrial and interaction design company, or back then they were mainly an industrial design company in Austria. And they happened to have the largest machine manufacturer as their client. And I just joined in the moment where they had their first big industrial interaction design project. So I got into that whole field of designing interfaces and designing processes for the industry. And I was doing that for 4.5 years. And where I'm now is that I dropped out of that company and joined in with Dreipol. Dreipol was founded by 3 former classmates of mine from the Zurich University of the Arts. And the CEO of Dreipol is actually the guy I built my final project with, where we did a robot for old people. And so sort of now it sort of all comes together. The expertise they built up over the past couple of years designing interfaces and services for end consumers, and my know-how of how to design for process in the industry, we merge that and do interesting stuff now.
Now let's quickly talk about the industrial sector, because we talked about this last time we chatted, and it was really interesting to me why you are so excited about this field. Because, you know, probably some other people would say, you know, I would only want to work with on Apple stuff, you know, on cutting edge, innovative stuff. And you have sort of like chosen a sector where it's like going from a very traditional business to, you know, to going modern. Why that sector? Why that specific area of industrial?
From a designer's perspective, industrial is really interesting because there's a lot you can do there. It's I'm drawn to areas where I can do a lot of change, where I can move things. So I say if I as a designer would get a job offer from Apple themselves, I wouldn't be sure if I would accept it. Because what you're doing there is refining something that's already really amazing. Whereas where I am, it's still terrible. There's so much stuff that does not work well yet. Whatever you do is already a big change, and you really impact people's lives. I mean, an app I use every now and then. I open it up in the morning. Of course, there's a lot of interaction with your phone, but imagine someone who has to stand in front of an interface for 8 hours a day, look at that. If that is terrible, that really sucks. That really makes his day awful. So the change you can make an interface for a professional better is huge for that one person, or for the couple of hundred or thousands of persons who use that. But
yeah,
I feel I have more ability to, or more possibility to impact.
I love that. I love that distinction. You know, where there's a lot of things to do, and it's sort of like in the children's shoes, and there's a lot of really interesting stuff you can actually do. So like the leap forward is so big that's really the excitement, and those are the application or the impact on people's days or on people's jobs on a more fundamental level. Now, talk to me a little bit about this sector, you know, this industrial sector. We can talk about Switzerland, we can talk about in general, but I would really like to understand where you kind of like see things today. So what's the state of the art today? And then move a little bit into, so where do you see things heading? Maybe, you know, next 2, 3, maybe even 5 years from today?
Well, in the industry, there was this term was coined a couple of years ago, that Industry 4.0, that for us was really amazing. Everyone felt that they had to do something about it. Everyone thought everyone else is something doing about it, and no one knew how to do it. And in these areas where there's there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of space to design for that void. So what we've been doing, or what I've been doing with the very first project in my old agency, was streamlining, not even streamlining, more digitizing workflows. So that you have industrial machines that have tools that need to be put into the machines that break every now and then. You have materials that need to be supplied. And all of that was managed with a big stack of paper till then. People would leave each other notes and post-its on the machines themselves. Notes say, you know, if you don't do something about that smoke coming out of the back of the machine, then it will break down. Stuff like that was only written down by notes. It's all very, very, it's non-digital. And the first step was to digitize these workflows. And that actually is not too hard. It's digitizing, like just making sure that when you're on a machine, you have the data is coming directly from an ERP system and then goes further to a quality management system. That's not too hard. The interesting part comes in when you really want to make people's lives easier, when you want to help people solve physical problems, like how do I change tools in a machine? How do I make maintenance easier? Like, as long as everything is clean and digital, it's really easy. But as soon as you want to improve people's physical experience with an overlaying digital layer, then it becomes difficult. For example, the most obvious problems people with milling machines have is that they have to drive their milling head to the 0 point of the milling part. And they regularly crash into that piece. So the tool is gone, and even the raw part might be damaged a bit. And that's something that happens on a regular basis. And that's really hard to aid and solve through an interface or through a process. That's why this part has been ignored mainly. Everyone was looking at great digitalization processes, but no one really helped people with that very concrete problem, because it's very hard. And that's where I feel that that's an interesting part to help people in their daily lives.
I love that. I love that sort of like, and I want to go into that a little bit more, as we talk about the future a little bit. You know, this aiding in a physical experience with a digital layer.
Yeah.
To me, what comes to mind, is sort of like sending letters, in a sense.
Yeah.
There's a replacement, of course, right? To a
Yeah.
big extent.
Mhm.
So how do you see that in the future? Do you think that a lot of the physical experiences will somehow in some shape or form actually get replaced by a digital experience? Or do you think it's still going to be a big part, the physical experience, and just the digital side of it will be better and also more sort of like closer to an actual physical experience?
Especially in the industry, many parts are not, they can't be replaced really. Like you need to change a part in a machinery, the part needs to be changed. That can't be dissolved and be solved through a digital service or experience. It's some things you just have to do. You have a ropeway, and at some point you need to exchange certain parts that you will never beam maybe at some point you might beam yourself up. This dematerialization might happen, and you have a lot less physical parts. But I feel for the longest time now, or for the next time, it will near future, it will be that we build a very immersive digital layer on top of the physical world that helps you to do things, that helps you to go through complex processes, and for many suppliers or many companies who make industrial machinery, or let's say I had one client that had a tool that could drill in the ground. So you wouldn't have to make a ditch, you just could drill around houses underneath rivers. Their limiting factor was not the need, like loads of people would have bought the machines if they only had people who could use them. So the limiting factor was the number of qualified people in a certain area. So if you now manage to assist the people handling that machine without having to go through a several-year training, your market becomes huge all of a sudden. So I think the future is in aiding people through complex processes, so they don't need to be that highly educated. That also opens up all the emerging markets for you.
I love that. That's really interesting. And I'm curious about how you see that. I mean, do you see, first thing that comes to my mind is augmented reality, basically.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? Or is there some other thing that I'm not seeing right now or not know about maybe?
The one thing is, I mean, augmented reality is the obvious solution. And I think as soon as the form factor becomes small enough, and you don't have to have a bucket on your head, then I think that will really play out. Also, I think that augmented reality in the industry does make a lot of sense, because these are professional users who might wear that thing for several hours a day. They might already wear a helmet, like they already have something on their head. And you're way more willing to have something funny on your head while working in maintenance than walking through a city in everyday life. So I feel industrial applications will be the first, or there are already the first areas where this will impact. But behind augmented reality, you need all your assets, everything needs to be digitized in order to really, like you really need to know about everything, all the spare parts, what you're seeing in front of you, that needs to be enriched with a lot of digital data. Otherwise, all you're seeing is, there's nothing of value you can see then.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so that's from what we talked about. I feel like that's an example of a very, very close physical digital experience. Basically, that's basically very, very close. It's almost one at the end of the day from our own experience. Now, in terms of lessons, you mentioned a couple of things already, but I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into the the conversation around lessons that you learn, maybe from projects. We don't have to go into specifics, but specific projects, but just overall, when it comes to the industrial industry, and we look at the digitization and the enriching the physical experience with the digital layer, what are some of the cornerstone lessons that you would say you learned in the process of working on so many projects? Maybe some of the pitfalls as well.
I feel from a designer's perspective, working in this field, it's very often it's not so much the complexity of the topic you're working with, it's the complexity of all the stakeholders that are involved. I mean, not that they are as people are complex, but they are very different people from very different backgrounds that also might be very critical towards designers. Like if I come in and as a designer, I am perceived as the guy who makes things pretty at the end. And to establish the role, our role differently, that we are the people who can help shape the experience in a very early stage, that meant that I had to learn how to motivate people and how to get them on board, to how to make allies and become a driver in these projects. That I feel was the biggest challenge. And funnily enough, I learned like a lot of skills I learned to aid me at that. I learned way earlier, before I studied even, by when I was selling furniture for a while in a very shop that didn't sell particularly beautiful furniture, but I had to, like, people came in and I thought all these furniture are ugly, and people came in and then at some point I had to realize that I might not like them, but they might be the right furniture for this couple. And that helped me to get out of my own head and put myself into other people's shoes. And that's what I do every day when I work in projects, is how do other people see this topic? How can I, by understanding them, pull them along? And it's all about listening. It's how to listen to what they're saying, include their ideas into my ideas and feed them back to them. And that's how I think that's a key thing in these projects, that how can we motivate everyone and establish a vision that we all head the same direction from a project managing standpoint of view.
I love that. It's a little bit like the last thing you said, is a little bit like the curse of knowledge. The more you know, the more you sort of like become detached of, maybe the customer, for example. And that's really important, to be able to step into their shoes and really experience it from their perspective. Because in that situation, it doesn't matter if you like the furniture or not. In terms of success, it doesn't matter if you like them or not. At the end of the day, what matters is if they like it or not. And I can imagine that in a similar context, like it doesn't matter if you like the interface of the professional working on it. It matters that they work it, that they like it, that it's a great experience for them. And what you do is sort of like you bring your unique ability, your talent of understanding people's design wishes, I guess, the human needs in terms of design and flow and all these things, and you map that basically over people's individual needs, and that's really powerful.
It is not that I want to design stuff that I'm convinced that it's good, that whatever I make, I want to use it myself as well. I don't want to sell stuff just knowing that someone else might like it and I find it awful. That wouldn't make me happy.
It makes sense.
but also when I sold furniture, it was at some point I realized I might not put it in my room, but it's objectively not an ugly thing. I just widened my perception, my what I considered being either beautiful or useful. Yeah.
Now I want to dive a little bit more into specifics. Maybe you can give some guidance in terms of how to think about things, maybe some tools or how, whatever you want to share here. So let's say, somebody, a decision maker in the, in the industrial sector, whose basic job is to digitize certain things, or maybe, the owner, or, somebody in charge of the digital side of things of an industrial company is listening to this, and they say, this is really great, but where do I even get started? I mean, where do you even get started? Do you get started with a value proposition canvas? Do you get started with a certain set of questions? How do you get started to actually understand, okay, what is the job to be done, I guess? Like, where do you get started?
From a design point of view, we always start with people, with the sort of bottom up, the people who are working with your product every day. And you look at their experience and how their day looks like, and how their day looks like even before they come to use your product. How they get up in the morning, how they get to work, how they get sort of prepared, go into the wherever environment where your product is, and then work with it, and then even go out again. That whole day, if you start tracking how their day looks like, and how their experience with your product looks like, and how their experience with other products looks like, and to figure out what part of their daily lives is occupied with dealing with your product. I think that is a good starting point to then figure out where is potential for improvement. And that usually has huge impact into, like, backstage onto, all which parts do you need to digitize? What information do you need to supply? I would start with that once I started looking where it's ending up at the end of the day.
I love to start with the customer at the end of the day, right? I mean, it's really about understanding the customer, whatever the customer may be. It may be the employee using the machine. It may be the actual customer buying the product. It may be the actual user of the product at the customer, whatever that may be at the end of the day. Starting with that makes a lot of sense, and I love that, it's sort of like common sense, I guess, starting with the customer, but sometimes we can just get so wrapped up in all kinds of stuff and strategies and this and that we sort of like forget that simple fact that at the end of the day, nothing matters if it's not customized to the actual person using whatever it is that they're using. And I love that. I love going back to that. So that's great. Last question really that I have is a little bit more into the future. maybe at a point we're actually going to be able to beam ourselves. Who knows? But let's put you in a rocking chair and you're 80 years old and you're sitting on your terrace and you're looking outside or wherever you are, and you're really enjoying the view and you're looking back at your life. What are some of the changes that you would like to see, either in that industry, in business, or in general in the world?
That would be 2060. So I'd hope that I'll still not be ankle deep in water because climate change has destroyed everything. So that means I'd like to be part of the solution of not ruining our planet, even if it's a tiny part. So that whole, it's a difficult and big question.
It's a huge question.
It's a huge question. Well, I would like to be part of making people's life easier, and everything I do increases efficiency. And if that increase of efficiency would at some point not always feed right into making more profit, but maybe at some point feed back to maybe we don't need to work that hard. With artificial intelligence coming and that having a big impact in this area, we might not even need to work that much. There is not that much work left at some point, and we can't keep producing and ruining our planet. So being an enabler and making people's lives easier, and then hoping that that would not only go into profit, but also into maybe having a universal basic income, of sitting on our porch and drinking my margaritas paid by the machines that I helped produce it one day in the past. So that sort of hope that this cycle of higher efficiency at some point diverges into not only more profit, but also feeds back to the people that we initially designed for.
I love that vision, taking, such a, almost like a hard fact of saying it's about efficiency, and taking that and sort of like projecting that out in terms of, well, at one point, efficiency for the sake of efficiency and for the sake of what we're already doing, there's sort of like a tipping point. There's a tip over that where it's about, suddenly we need to do maybe less work, or, it ripples into a lot of other aspects of our society and maybe multi-planetary species, who knows. So I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, Florian. And thank you for being on the show and taking the time to share your experiences and your insights. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.